والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Brothers and sisters, I've been traveling around the country talking to young people at different universities, talking to parents, talking to families. And the theme that I have come away with is that there is so much heartbreak. And that heartbreak at the injustice in the world, and I don't just mean in our community, that heartbreak at the injustice in the world is leading people to two unhelpful extremes. On one hand, there is a widespread feeling of being defeated, of despair, of being deflated, where people feel that the resources are so stacked against us, that there is so little on our side that they just don't know what else to do and have fallen into apathy. The other side of that extreme is a feeling of so much desperate rage that people, especially young people, are just seeing red and are unable to think through the issues in a rational manner. But both of these extremes are destructive. Both of these extremes are ones we have to avoid to forge the path forward to work for justice. We know in our society that most bankruptcies are not because someone overshopped at Sephora or bought too many expensive electronics. It's because they spent all their money on their healthcare bills and couldn't pay the bills at the end and had to declare bankruptcy. When police brutality disproportionately targets Black lives, when we see children burned and maimed in the tens of thousands as our government funds and enables the genocide, our human heart is stirred toward movement. And so yes, the drive for justice is in every human heart, no matter who we are. It is as primal as the drive for food and shelter. But absent divine guidance, we are either giving up or looking at someone like this young man who assassinated a CEO. Some people are looking at him as a folk hero, another extreme. Justice is the sunnah of Allah. He prohibited oppression on himself and prohibited in his creation. We know from science that systems tend toward equilibrium. This is the natural movement of the world, of the created universe. It's what drives the physical world, and the same creator made the drive in human affairs. He made the drive in human history toward equilibrium, toward balancing the scales, toward justice. So let this be a warning to every tyrant, whether he or she rules over a family or a nation state. But Islam came to channel this natural drive, this natural primal drive of the human heart into healthy and virtuous boundaries. And this includes our drive toward justice. So how do we forge a middle path of balance and justice between defeatism and fanaticism? You know, I am always struck by the fact that the Quran stands unique in its emphasis on justice, in its description of justice, in its many details so what I'd like to share with you are 5 principles of movements toward justice from our tradition. How do we work for justice in a way that is compliant with our faith? The first principle is what we need courage. The Quran tells us, يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين بالقسط شهداء لله. O you who have attained faith, be ever vigilant, stand firm with justice, bearing witness to God. Standing for justice is an injunction of faith. It is a condition of faith. When an ayah starts with Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, O you who believe, O you who have attained faith, and continues to give us a command, we need to be listening very carefully. This means this is a foundational principle of simply being a believer. So we cannot be bystanders. We do not have an option of being indifferent to injustice. Our faith commands standing firm for justice as witnesses to Allah. The second principle of working for justice is about conviction. It won't be our means that attain justice. It will only be by Allah's might, but we still must work. We are commanded to stand for justice and not to achieve it. And that helps us not feel the despair. It also helps us from moving away, helps us move away from the blinding rage that we can fall into when we think there's nothing else but the material reality on the ground, which is indeed enraging. We have to remember that Al-Muntaqim is in control. The revenge taker is in control. So having this conviction means that we put our trust in Allah and not in our means. That also protects us against burnout. How many activists, including myself, have felt burned out because we thought the work needed us and it felt so insurmountable. When we know that it is up to Allah and we are only asked to work and not to achieve the result, we can keep going with faith and with reliance. Compassion, the third element of working for justice. Al-adl wal-ihsan, fairness and beautiful action. They go hand in hand in our faith. We are taught not to let the hatred of a people make you swerve toward injustice. This is an ayah in Surah Al-Ma'idah, the 5th surah of the Quran. This was the last surah to be revealed in totality, in its full form. It came at the very end of the mission of Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam. It was readying the believers to rule, not just to be subjects or to rule over a small portion of one city-state, but to rule multiple states, to rule, in fact, half the world. They were being ready to govern, and they would be governing people who hated them. They would be governing people who were horrible to them, and yet they still had to act with justice. So compassion must be an element in how we work for justice. I think one of the most beautiful examples of this, a simple example, is that Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam, when to him before he migrated to return the property of the very people who were conspiring to assassinate him. If I've ever seen an example of this principle modeled for us, this is one of them. He insisted on doing what was right, even with those who hated him so much they wanted to end his life. The fourth principle of working for justice is building communities of justice, is building communities that work for justice and not cults. Places where the work for justice, the drive for justice doesn't take away from people's ability to think freely, to ask questions, to even dissent, disagree, point to mistakes, self-criticize. We cannot work for justice if we do not have justice between us. Rasulullah was the leader most clearly building a community of justice, working for justice, sent to establish justice on earth. And his community weren't a group of yes men and women. He did not surround himself with people who were unwilling to question. They were free to question. They were sometimes a little too free in their questioning, raising concerns, giving alternative solutions. Our quest for justice has to be through a process of establishing justice within our groups, within our societies, within our organizations, within our families, within our communities. And the fifth is cooperation. وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ. Cooperate for piety and God consciousness, and do not cooperate for sin and aggression. To establish justice, we have to be working with other people who are interested in establishing justice. And this ayah is quite remarkable because it commands us to work with others. There's no condition of who they are. The only condition is what we're cooperating for. That's where the principle comes in. We are cooperating for goodness, for piety and God consciousness, and not sin and aggression. So if you want to work with us for the good of humanity, we'll work with you. We don't have to endorse your every decision, your every identity, your every lifestyle. But as soon as we are asked to work or cooperate for sin and aggression, then that is where we draw the line. When Rasulullah ﷺ opened Mecca with 10,000 men, an army of 10,000 men, so insurmountable for the Meccans that they had to surrender, and he wanted it to be so overwhelming to them that they would surrender without a fight, to save lives. He didn't want to risk even having a fight. So the alliance had to be enormous and overwhelming to force an immediate surrender, and that's exactly what happened. But those 10,000 men and that alliance, they included tribes that were not yet Muslim. So they were cooperating with those they disagreed with ideologically on major issues around aqidah, around creed, because they were working for what was right and what was just. But if those same people had demanded a compromise on our values or an endorsement of their alternative beliefs, the answer would have been no. Brothers and sisters, our need for justice is as primal as our need for food and shelter. May our work for this sacred value reflect the beauty of our faith, the courage of our predecessors, and the compassion of the man called a mercy to all the worlds. Thank you.